If on your 18th birthday you found your name crossed out of the will, would you cry or authorize a house sale in 12 hours? At 18, I realized I was just a walking wallet to my family. While they thought I was obedient, I signed papers that ruined their lives in one afternoon. The real twist wasn't changing the locks, but signing a new last name, severing a bloodline I thought was permanent. My name is Callie Mercer. And the silence that greeted me at 6 in the morning on my 18th birthday was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and remarkably telling. In Maple Ridge, Ohio, birthdays are usually a public spectacle. The neighbors engage in a quiet war of lawn signs and balloon arches, ensuring that everyone on the cul-de-sac knows exactly who is being celebrated and how much money was spent on the display. But as I sat up in bed, the air in the house was still and stale. There were no balloons bumping against my ceiling fan. There was no smell of pancakes or bacon drifting up the stairs. There was just the hum of the central air conditioning and the gray morning light filtering through the blinds I had bought with money from my own summer job. It was a normal day, which made it completely abnormal. I walked downstairs, my bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floors. The house was immaculate, a showroom of suburban success that my father, Darren, and my stepmother, Lydia, curated with obsessive precision. I moved to the kitchen, a vast expanse of granite and stainless steel. The island was empty except for a small, yellow sticky note stuck to the counter. I peeled it off. It was Lydia's handwriting, looping, hurried, and impersonal. Dad and I had to go out early to handle some important business. Stay home and rest. We will talk later. Important business, on a Saturday, on my 18th birthday. They had not even bothered to leave a card. There was no gift, not even a token gesture of affection, just an order to stay put and be a good, quiet girl. I crumpled the note in my fist, a sudden flare of irritation rising in my chest, but I pushed it down. This was expected. This was the routine. I was the ghost in the machine of their perfect family life, necessary for the image, but inconvenient for the reality. I turned to throw the paper away, and that was when I saw it. The door to my father's home office was ajar. This was a violation of the house rules more severe than wearing shoes on the carpet. Darren never left that door open. He treated that room like a vault, the command center where he managed the chaotic finances of his contracting business and Lydia's endless spending. Seeing that sliver of darkness between the door and the frame felt like a trap, or perhaps an invitation. A strange, cold instinct took over my limbs. It was not curiosity, it was a premonition. I walked to the office door and pushed it open with my fingertips. The room smelled of stale coffee and cedar. His desk was usually a mess of blueprints and invoices, but today it was relatively clear, save for a stack of papers sitting right in the center, near his leather blotter. I approached the desk. My heart should have been racing, but it was beating with a slow, heavy thud. The document on top was a photocopy. The paper was still crisp, likely printed late last night or very early this morning. The header was standard legal jargon, but the title was clear enough. It was a draft of a last will and testament. I reached out and flipped the pages. I did not read the preamble. I went straight to the distribution of assets, driven by a gut feeling that I could not explain. And there it was. Page 4. My name, Callie Mercer, was there, but a thick, angry red line had been drawn through it. It was not a correction. It was an obliteration. The pen had pressed down so hard that even on the photocopy, the line looked heavy and final. Below the red slash, new text had been handwritten in the margins, waiting to be formalized by a lawyer. All assets, including the primary residence on Hawthorne Lane, to be divided equally between Darren Lane, Lydia Lane, and Savannah Lane. Savannah, my half-sister, she was 16. She got a share. I got a red line. I stared at the paper. I waited for the tears to come. I waited for the heartbreak, the sobbing, the feeling of betrayal that I had seen in movies. But none of that happened. Instead, a physical sensation washed over me, starting at the base of my skull and spreading down to my fingertips. It was cold, absolute, freezing cold. It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and flipped a breaker switch. The part of me that wanted their love, the part that had spent years babysitting, cleaning, and paying for my own existence just to earn a smile from Darren, simply turned off. The darkness was instant. The emotional noise vanished. I was no longer a daughter. I was a liability they had just decided to liquidate. They were at a lawyer's office right now. That was the important business. They were finalizing this draft. They were rewriting the future to ensure that when the time came, I would leave this house with nothing but the clothes on my back. I carefully placed the paper back exactly how I found it. I backed out of the room. I pulled the door until it was just slightly ajar, matching the angle at which I had found it. I walked back up the stairs, my movements mechanical and precise. I entered my bedroom and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating my face in the dim room. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I navigated to the secure portal for the Harper Trust. My grandmother, Margaret Harper, had died 4 years ago. She was a woman of few words and sharp eyes. She never liked Lydia. She tolerated my father, but she had loved me with a fierce, protective intensity that I had not understood until this very moment. I entered my username and password. The screen loaded, a small spinning wheel counting down the seconds of my old life. Welcome, Callie Mercer. Current status, active. Role, sole beneficiary and trustee. Effective date, today. The timestamp on the server showed that the change in status had occurred at 1 minute past midnight. I clicked on the Assets tab. There it was, the house, the beautiful, sprawling suburban home on Hawthorne Lane. My father liked to call it his castle. Lydia liked to call it her dream home. But according to the deed held within the trust, it was simply asset number 1. Grandma Margaret had bought this house. She had let my father live here to raise me. She had put it in the trust with a specific clause that triggered on my 18th birthday. I was now the landlord. I was the owner. I was the authority. My father and Lydia were currently sitting in a lawyer's office, paying hundreds of dollars an hour to divide up a house that they did not own. They were fighting over a pie that had already been eaten. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Walter Briggs. He was an old-school lawyer, the kind who wore 3-piece suits and still used a fountain pen. He had been my grandmother's attorney for 40 years. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Hello? His voice was raspy, filled with sleep. It was barely 6:15 in the morning. Mr. Briggs, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was deeper, flatter. This is Callie Mercer. There was a rustling of sheets on the other end. Callie, is everything all right? It is very early. I am 18 today. Mr. Briggs, I said. A pause. The rustling stopped. Happy birthday, Callie. Thank you, I said. I am looking at the trust portal. I see that the transfer of authority is complete. Yes, Walter said, his voice clearing, becoming professional. As of midnight, you have full control. We were scheduled to meet next week to go over the portfolio, but I am skipping the meeting, I interrupted. I have a specific instruction. Okay, Walter said slowly. What is it? I looked around my room. I looked at the walls I had painted myself because Lydia said hiring a painter was a waste of money for my room. I looked at the second-hand furniture. I want to sell the house, I said. Silence stretched over the line. The house on Hawthorne Lane? Callie, that is where you live. That is where your family lives. I want to sell it, I repeated, and I want it done today. Callie, Walter said, his tone shifting to one of gentle concern. Real estate transactions take time. You have inspections, listings, escrow. It is a process that usually takes months. I do not have months, I said. I have 12 hours. I heard Walter take a sharp breath. 12 hours? Has something happened? I saw a document on my father's desk, I said. They are writing me out. Walter. They are at a lawyer right now, carving up this house like they own it. They think I am asleep. The silence on the other end was heavy. but it was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of understanding. Margaret suspected this might happen, Walter said softly. She hoped she was wrong. She hoped Darren would step up, but she prepared for this. She prepared for them to betray me? I asked. She prepared for you to need an exit strategy, Walter corrected. The deed is clear. You have the unilateral right to liquidate, no signatures required from the occupants. Good, I said. Then get the paperwork ready. I'm going to find a buyer. In 12 hours? Walter asked. Watch me, I said. I hung up the phone. I did not waste a second. 2 years ago, a man named Elias Romano had knocked on our door. He was a real estate investor who specialized in flipping high-end properties in our district. He had offered my father a significant sum for the house, cash. My father had turned him down, laughing, saying the market would go higher. I had kept Elias's business card, tucking it into the back of my journal, not knowing why I was saving it. Now I knew. I pulled the card out. I typed the number into my phone and composed a text message. I did not bother with pleasantries. This is Callie Mercer. Hawthorne Lane. You wanted it 2 years ago. I am selling it today. Cash only. Close by 5 in the afternoon. No inspections. No negotiations. Do you want it? I hit send. I sat back in my chair and watched the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light coming through the window. Downstairs, the house was silent. It was a deceptive peace. It was the calm before the artillery fire. My phone buzzed in my hand. It had been less than 30 seconds. The message from Elias Romano was short. I am interested. Send me the price. I typed in a number. It was slightly below market value, a figure that screamed fire sale, a figure that no investor with cash on hand could possibly refuse. It was enough to pay for my college, buy a small apartment, and start a life where I never had to ask anyone for anything ever again. I sent it. The 3 dots bubbled on the screen for a moment, then disappeared. Deal. I will have my lawyers call yours within the hour. I set the phone down on the desk. My father and stepmother were out there in the world, thinking they were the authors of this story. They thought they held the pen. They thought they could erase me with a stroke of red ink. They were wrong. I stood up and walked to my closet. I pulled out a duffel bag. I did not pack everything. I only packed what mattered. The photo of my mother, my journals, the sweater Grandma Margaret had knitted for me. I was 18 years old. I had no parents. Really, I had no home. But as I zipped up the bag, the sound echoing in the empty room, I realized something else. I had power, and for the first time in my life, I was going to use it. I do not remember my mother, Elena. I only know her through the stillness of photographs and the hushed tones my relatives used whenever they spoke her name, as if saying it too loudly might shatter the fragile peace of our household. She died of ovarian cancer when I was 11 months old, leaving behind a grieving husband and an infant who would never know the warmth of her chest. My aunts liked to tell me the story of the funeral. They described how my father, Darren, stood by the open grave in the driving rain, holding me against his black suit coat, shielding my face from the water. They said he looked broken, a man whose world had collapsed. They told me he whispered a vow that day, loud enough for the front row to hear, that no one would ever take her place, that it would always be just him and me against the world. It was a beautiful lie. Less than 2 years later, Darren brought Lydia home. I was too young to understand the concept of a stepmother, or even the concept of a replacement. I only knew that the house, which had smelled of baby powder and my father's cedar aftershave, was suddenly overwhelmed by the sharp, cloying scent of gardenias. Lydia did not ease into our lives. She colonized them. She rearranged the furniture within a week. She packed away the few framed photos of Elena that sat on the mantelpiece, claiming that dwelling on the past was unhealthy for a growing child. When I was barely 2 years old, Savannah was born. From that moment on, the geometry of our family shifted permanently. I was no longer the center of my father's world. I was the satellite that had to be moved to make orbit for the new sun. Lydia had a phrase she weaponized with terrifying efficiency, a mantra repeated so often it felt etched into the drywall of the house. You are the big sister, Callie. You have to understand. Understanding meant yielding. It meant that when Savannah cried, my needs became invisible. It meant that my toys were community property. But Savannah's toys were fragile treasures that I was forbidden to touch. It was never overt abuse. Lydia never raised a hand to me. She never starved me. She simply curated a childhood where I was always the second option. I remember a Tuesday evening when I was 7. We were having dinner, and there was one last piece of chocolate cake left in the box from the bakery. I reached for it, my hand hovering over the cardboard. Lydia cleared her throat, a sound like dry leaves scraping pavement. Oh, honey, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Savannah had a hard day at preschool today. Let her have the treat. You are older. You can control your cravings. I watched Savannah, who had spent the day playing in a sandbox, eat the cake while I sat with my hands folded in my lap, learning the bitter taste of unfairness. My father sat at the head of the table, reading the sports section, pretending he did not hear the quiet snap of my heart breaking over a piece of confectionery. He chose peace over justice, every single time. My maternal grandmother, Margaret Harper, saw everything. She lived on the other side of town in a small, brick bungalow that smelled of loose-leaf tea and old books. She was not a warm, cookie-baking grandmother. She was steel-wrapped in wool cardigans. She watched Lydia with eyes that missed nothing, sharp blue eyes that I had inherited. Margaret was the one who noticed that while I was wearing hand-me-down coats from a cousin, Savannah had a brand-new pink parka with fur trim, because pink is her color, and we want her to feel confident. Margaret was the one who saw my father come to her house, hat in hand, complaining about the crushing weight of the mortgage and the cost of raising 2 daughters, asking for a loan to cover the electricity bill. And she was the one who saw Lydia drive up the next day in a new SUV with leather seats, talking about how necessary it was for safety. The disparity was not just emotional, it was financial, and it was growing. The turning point came when I was 10 years old. It was a gray, blustery afternoon in November. Margaret picked me up from school, which was unusual, usually. I took the bus while Lydia drove Savannah to gymnastics. My grandmother's sedan was warm and quiet. She did not drive me to the ice cream parlor or the park. She drove us downtown, to a tall building with revolving glass doors. Where are we going? Grandma? I asked, my legs swinging off the edge of the stiff leather seat in the lobby. To buy you an umbrella. Callie, she said, her face grim, because it is going to rain. We went up to the 14th floor, to the law offices of Briggs & Associates. That was the first time I met Walter Briggs. He was younger then, his hair only just starting to gray at the temples. The office smelled of mahogany and serious decisions. I sat in a corner with a coloring book that I was too old for, while Margaret and Walter sat at a massive desk covered in documents. They spoke in low, intense tones for hours. I caught fragments of sentences that floated over the room like dust motes. Irrevocable. Protection. The house on Hawthorne Lane. Until she is of age. I did not know it then, but my grandmother was buying the house my father lived in. My father had fallen behind on payments, drowning in the debt created by Lydia's lifestyle. And Margaret had stepped in. She paid off the mortgage entirely, but she did not put the deed in Darren's name. She put it into a trust. Eventually, Walter called me over to the desk. He looked at me with a kindness that felt out of place in such a sterile room. Callie, I need you to sign your name here, he said, pointing to a line at the bottom of a thick stack of paper. This is just to say that you were here today. I wrote my name in careful cursive, the loops of the C and the L's perfectly round, just as my teacher had taught me. Then Margaret signed. Her hand was steady, the pen scratching loud against the paper. When we left the office, the sky had turned a bruised purple. We got into her car, but she did not start the engine immediately. She turned in her seat to face me, taking both of my small hands in her cold, dry ones. Listen to me, Callie, she said, Her voice was not loud, but it had a weight that pressed me back into the seat. I have done something today that you will not understand for a long time, but you must promise me you will remember what I say. I promise, I whispered, frightened by her intensity. Your father is a good man, but he is weak, she said, stating it as a fact, like the color of the sky. And Lydia looks at our family and sees a bank account. They think this house belongs to them. They think I paid for it to help them, but I did not. She squeezed my hands tighter. I did it for you. This trust, these papers, they are your lifeboat. When you turn 18, you will be the captain. If they love you, if they treat you right, then the boat stays docked. But if a day comes when they forget who you are, if they try to push you overboard to save themselves, you remember this. You have your own oar. You can row away. I nodded. Though the metaphor was too big for my 10-year-old mind to fully grasp, I just knew that Grandma was angry at them and protective of me. When I got home that night, Lydia was waiting in the kitchen. She looked at the large manila envelope in my grandmother's hands. Is that the paperwork? Lydia asked, her eyes scanning the seal on the envelope. Did you sign the house over to Darren? Margaret placed the envelope on the counter. Her movement slow and deliberate. The house is taken care of. Lydia, you do not need to worry about the mortgage anymore. You and the girls have a roof over your heads. Lydia smiled, a bright, predatory flash of teeth. Oh, Margaret, thank you. You have no idea how much stress this relieves. We can finally think about redoing the patio now that the payment is gone. Margaret looked at her, then at my father, who was standing by the fridge looking sheepish and relieved. She did not correct them. She did not tell them that the house was not theirs. She did not tell them about the clause on page 42 that triggered on my 18th birthday, the clause that gave me sole, unilateral power to liquidate the asset. She let them believe what they wanted to believe because she wanted to give them a chance to be decent. She wanted to be wrong. But as I looked at Lydia's triumphant face, and then at Savannah, who was tugging on my father's sleeve demanding to watch cartoons, I felt a cold knot in my stomach, even at 10. I sensed that the storm my grandmother predicted was inevitable. That night, lying in bed, I replayed Margaret's words, a lifeboat. For the next 8 years, I lived in that house, walking on eggshells, watching the renovations that Lydia ordered, watching the money drain away, all while knowing that beneath the floorboards, there was a secret that belonged only to me. They treated the house like a permanent kingdom, never suspecting that they were merely guests living on the mercy of a clock that was slowly ticking down to midnight on my 18th birthday. And they never once asked me what was in the envelope. They were too busy celebrating what they thought they had won. By the time I turned 14, I had learned that love in the Lane household was a currency, and the exchange rate was extortionate. While other teenagers in Maple Ridge were worrying about prom dates or varsity jackets, I was learning the geography of labor. I learned that shoveling a driveway took 45 minutes if the snow was wet and heavy, but only 20 if it was powder. I learned that neighbors would pay $15 an hour for a babysitter who cleaned the dishes after the kids went to sleep. I learned that if I wanted new sneakers, or a field trip fee, or just the dignity of having cash in my pocket, I had to earn it myself. My hands were always dry and chapped from the cold, or from cleaning products. My fingernails were cut short. I became a fixture in the neighborhood, the reliable Mercer girl who would walk your dog in the rain or rake your leaves until the lawn was immaculate. I hoarded every dollar bill in a shoebox under my bed, not because I was greedy, but because I knew that if I asked my father for money, I would get a sigh, a lecture about the economy, and a look of profound disappointment that I was adding to his burden. When I turned 16, I leveled up. I got a work permit and a job at a chain coffee shop near the highway. It was not glamorous. I wore a synthetic green apron that smelled perpetually of stale espresso and burnt milk. My shifts were the ones nobody else wanted. Closing on Friday nights, opening on Sunday mornings, while Savannah and Lydia spent their weekends at the luxury spa in the next town over, getting mud wraps and cucumber facials, I was scraping dried gum off the undersides of tables and smiling at customers who yelled at me because their latte foam was too bubbly. I did not resent the work. In fact, I liked the anonymity of it. I liked the weight of the paycheck in my hand every 2 weeks. But what I did resent, what burned in my gut like acid, was where that money, and the money from the trust's maintenance fund, eventually went. The trust fund my grandmother established had a subsidiary account. It was technically for my health, education, and maintenance, a broad legal term that my father and Lydia interpreted with creative flexibility because I was a minor. I could not stop them from accessing it, but as I got older, the bank required my counter-signature on withdrawals over a certain amount. This was the mechanism of my exploitation. It started small. My father would come into my room, sitting on the edge of my bed, smelling of sawdust and desperation. "Callie, honey," he would say, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Business is a little tight this month. We need to fix the roof. It is for the house. It is for your future asset. If we do not fix it, the value goes down. You understand that, right?" I would nod. It made sense, so I signed. But then the request changed. The roof became a kitchen renovation. Lydia insisted that a chef-grade kitchen would increase the resale value of the home by 20%. I stood in the kitchen with my backpack slung over one shoulder, looking at the glossy brochures of Italian marble and smart fridges. "But we have a working stove," I had said quietly. Lydia had laughed, a tinkling sound that lacked all warmth. "Oh, Callie, you have no vision. This is an investment. Do you want your inheritance to be a dump?" So I signed the withdrawal slip. The renovation cost $30,000. When it was finished, the kitchen was a pristine white palace of quartz and stainless steel. It was beautiful. And the very first rule Lydia established was that I was not allowed to cook in it. "You are too messy," she told me, wiping a non-existent speck of dust from the island. "Use the microwave in the pantry. I do not want grease on the backsplash." I paid for the kitchen I was forbidden to use. Then came the pool. Savannah wanted a heated saltwater pool. She was trying out for the varsity cheer squad, and she argued that swimming was essential for her stamina. Darren pitched it to me as a health expense. "It is good for the whole family," he said, sliding the paper across the dining table toward me. "And think of the equity. Callie, a pool in this neighborhood is gold." I looked at him. I looked at the tired lines around his eyes, the way he seemed to shrink whenever Lydia walked into the room. I wanted him to be the father who stood in the rain at my mother's funeral. I wanted him to protect me, but I realized then that he was just a middleman for Lydia's ambitions. If I sign this, I thought, maybe he will smile at me. Maybe they will stop treating me like a tenant and start treating me like a daughter. It was a naive, pathetic hope. I signed. The pool cost $45,000. Savannah hosted pool parties every other weekend that summer. I watched from my bedroom window, listening to the bass of the music shaking the glass, watching Savannah and her friends shriek and splash in the water that I had paid for. I was never invited. When I came downstairs to get a glass of water, Lydia would shoo me away, saying I was bringing negative energy to the guests. I was the financier of their joy, but I was not allowed to participate in it. The climax of this financial grotesquerie happened on our 16th birthdays. Savannah and I were born 2 years apart, but our birthdays fell in the same month. For Savannah's 16th, Lydia pulled out all the stops. They rented the local country club ballroom. There was a professional DJ, a custom lighting rig, and a photo booth with props. Savannah wore a designer dress that cost more than my car. My father made a toast, tearing up as he talked about his beautiful, talented princess. The party cost thousands of dollars, money that I knew, with sickening certainty, had been siphoned from the maintenance budget over the last 6 months. My 16th birthday had been 2 weeks prior. I came home from a shift at the coffee shop, smelling of old syrup. There was a cardboard box on the kitchen counter. It was a supermarket sheet cake, the kind with the neon frosting that tastes like chemicals. It had a clearance sticker on the plastic lid. Manager's Special, $5.99. Darren and Lydia were watching television. Savannah was texting on the sofa. "Happy birthday," Darren said without looking away from the screen. "There is cake." I opened the box. The writing and icing said, "Happy B-Day," and nothing else. They had not even bothered to have my name written on it. I cut a slice and ate it standing over the sink, staring at the marble countertop I had bought. That was the night the naive hope finally died. I stopped signing the slips with hope. I started signing them with a cold calculation. I kept a ledger. I wrote down every dollar. I saved the receipts. I knew, deep down, that a reckoning was coming, even if I did not know what form it would take. Meanwhile, across town, the only person who truly loved me was fading. Grandma Margaret's decline was slow and cruel. Dementia is a thief that steals a person by inches. At first, it was just lost keys or forgotten appointments. Then, she started calling me by my mother's name. She would look at me with misty eyes and ask why Elena was home so early from school. I visited her every Sunday. I would sit by her bed in the assisted living facility, another expense that was eating into her personal savings, though thankfully the trust for the house was separate, and hold her hand. Even in the fog of her mind, her protective instinct remained sharp. "How are they?" she would ask, her voice raspy. "Are they kind to you?" I looked at her frail hands, the skin translucent like parchment paper. I could not tell her the truth. I could not tell her that they were bleeding the accounts dry, that I was a stranger in my own home, that my father was a coward. It would have killed her faster. "They are fine, Grandma." I lied. "Dad is working hard. Lydia." She would narrow her eyes, a flash of the old steel cutting through the confusion. "Do not let them walk on you. Callie, you are a Harper. We have spines of iron." The last time she was truly lucid was a Tuesday in rainy April. I had skipped school to see her because the nurses said she had taken a turn. She was lying propped up on pillows, breathing shallowly. When I walked in, she turned her head and focused on me with terrifying clarity. The dementia was gone for a moment, pulled back like a curtain. She reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers digging into my skin. "Callie," she rasped. "I am here, Grandma." "They will try to take it," she hissed. "When I am gone, they will think the guard dog is dead. They will try to strip the meat from the bone." "I know," I whispered. "The house," she said, her eyes wide and frantic. "It is your shield. Do not let them have it. Promise me. Wait for the birthday. Wait for the clock." "I promise," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "I will wait." "Don't let them win," she breathed, and then the light faded from her eyes, and she slipped back into the confusion, muttering about a garden she planted 40 years ago. She died 3 days later. The funeral was small. My father cried loudly, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. Lydia wore a black dress that was tastefully expensive and looked solemn. Savannah checked her phone during the eulogy. I stood apart from them. I did not cry. I felt a cold, hard stone settling in my chest where my heart used to be. After the service, when everyone had walked back to the cars to go to the reception, I stayed behind at the grave. The fresh earth was dark against the green grass. The headstone was simple. Margaret Harper, beloved mother and grandmother. I touched the cold granite. "You gave me the ore," I whispered to the dirt. "I am going to use it." I did not know then that the timing would be so poetic. I did not know that on my 18th birthday, they would hand me the weapon I needed by trying to write me out of existence. But standing there in the cemetery, with the wind whipping my hair across my face, I made a vow. I would continue to be the good daughter. I would work my shifts. I would sign their withdrawal slips for their pools and their gyms. I would let them think they had drained me dry. I would let them get comfortable. I would let them think they had won. Because the higher they built their castle on my land, the harder it would fall when I pulled the foundation out from under them. I walked back to the car, drying my eyes. Lydia rolled down the window as I approached. "Hurry up, Callie," she snapped. "We have reservations for lunch, and I do not want to lose the table." "I am coming," I said. And I smiled. It was the first real smile I had worn in years, because for the first time, I knew something they did not. I knew the expiration date of their happiness. The atmosphere in the house shifted exactly 7 days before my 18th birthday. It was subtle, like the drop in barometric pressure before a tornado touches down, a heaviness in the air that makes your ears pop. For years, I had been the invisible piece of furniture in the Lane household, unnoticed and ignored, but suddenly, I felt eyes on me. They were watching me. It was not the warm gaze of affection. It was the calculating assessment of a butcher eyeing a calf, deciding exactly where to make the cut. The first crack in their secrecy appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. I came home early from school because my last period study hall had been canceled. The house was quiet, the kind of mid-afternoon silence that usually meant no one was home. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and heard Lydia's voice drifting in from the sunroom. She was on the phone, her tone hushed but vibrant with excitement. "No, we have the appointment set," she was saying. "Thursday at 2? Yes, with lawyer Barnett. We felt it was time to finally get the papers sorted out before the big day." I stood frozen by the refrigerator, my hand hovering over the handle. The big day. She was not talking about a party. Lydia had not planned a party for me since I was 6. "I know," she continued, letting out a breathy laugh. "It is a relief. Darren agrees. We just need to make sure everything is watertight. We cannot have any loose ends." I backed away silently, retreating up the stairs before she could catch me. Lawyer Barnett. The name meant nothing to me. My grandmother's lawyer, the man who handled the trust, was Walter Briggs. If they were dealing with the family estate, they should have been talking to him. The fact that they were going to a stranger meant they were doing something they did not want Walter to know about. The second clue came 2 days later, on the morning of that Thursday appointment. My father, Darren, was a man of habits. He wore flannel shirts and work boots. He ran a contracting business. He dressed for dust and drywall. But that morning, he stood in front of the hallway mirror, tying a silk tie with trembling fingers. He wore his navy blue suit, the one he usually reserved for funerals and weddings. He had splashed on too much cologne, a spicy scent that tried to mask the smell of anxiety sweating through his pores. "You look nice," I said, leaning against the doorframe, testing the waters. "Big meeting with a client?" Darren jumped, his hands fumbling with the Windsor knot. He met my eyes in the mirror and then immediately looked away. "Coffee?" he muttered. "Just coffee with an old friend, Mike. You remember Mike?" I remembered Mike. Mike was a plumber who wore overalls and drank beer from the can. My father was not wearing a navy suit to drink coffee with a plumber. "Must be a fancy coffee shop," I said neutrally. "It is an anniversary," Darren lied, the fabrication clumsy and quick. "Of his business, we are celebrating." He grabbed his keys and left the house without saying goodbye. He walked too fast, like a man fleeing a crime scene before he had even committed it. My suspicion hardened into paranoia. I became a spy in my own home. I started noticing the microaggressions, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. That evening, I walked past Savannah's bedroom door. It was slightly open, and the glow of her ring light spilled into the hallway. She was on FaceTime with her best friend, Kaylee. "I know, right?" Savannah was giggling, applying lip gloss in the camera. "Daddy says it is going to be huge. Like, everything is going to be different next week. He says the house will basically be ours, for real this time. No more borrowing." She paused, listening to Kaylee, then laughed again. "I know. Finally, it belongs to the right people. You know? We can finally do the expansion." The right people. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. I was the wrong people. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I went downstairs to the kitchen. I needed concrete proof. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and scanned the room. The refrigerator was the command center of the house, covered in magnetic clips holding cheerleading schedules and grocery lists. And there it was, hidden behind a coupon for pizza, a small, square appointment card. Barnett and Associates, Family Law and Estate Planning. Thursday, October 12th, 2 in the afternoon. I took a picture of the card. Then I searched the name on my phone. Barnett and Associates was a firm downtown that specialized in asset protection and will contestation. They were sharks. They were the people you hired when you wanted to break a contract, not honor one. I needed to push them. I needed to see how far they were willing to go. The next evening at dinner, 3 days before my birthday, I dropped the bait. We were eating meatloaf. The only sound the scraping of forks against china. "I need to send the deposit for the dorm room at the university," I said casually. "It is due next week. I was going to pull it from the education fund in the trust, but I need a counter-signature." Darren choked on his water. He coughed violently, his face turning red. Lydia reached over and patted his back, her eyes fixed on me with a glassy, unblinking stare. "There is no rush, Callie," Lydia said, her voice smooth as oil. "You have plenty of time." "The deadline is Monday," I said. "My birthday." "Let's just wait," Darren wheezed, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He refused to look at me. "Let's wait until after your birthday. We can sit down as a family. We need to discuss the future. There are some changes we want to make, for everyone's benefit." "What kind of changes?" I asked. "Just adjustments," Darren said, waving his hand vaguely, "to make things more modern, more fair." Fair. That word hung in the air like smoke. In the Lane family dictionary, fair meant taking from me to give to Savannah. The night before my birthday, the tension was so thick it felt physical. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I heard footsteps downstairs. It was the heavy tread of my father and the lighter, clicking steps of Lydia. I crept out of bed and sat at the top of the stairs. The acoustics of the house carried sound from the kitchen up the stairwell if the angles were right. "It feels wrong. Darren," Lydia was saying. Though she did not sound guilty, she sounded impatient. "We have to do it. You know we do. We cannot have an 18-year-old girl holding the deed to the roof over our heads. It is unnatural." "I know." Darren's voice was low, miserable. "But she is my daughter. Margaret wanted her to have security." "Margaret was a bitter old woman who hated me," Lydia spat. "She tried to cut us out from the grave. This new will. It is just correcting a mistake. It is the moral thing to do. Darren, we are the parents. We should be in control. We will take care of her. We won't kick her out. We just need the leverage." "She is going to hate me," Darren whispered. "She will get over it," Lydia said firmly. "Once the papers are signed and the waiting period is over, she will have no choice. She will learn to be grateful for what we give her." I sat there in the dark, clutching my knees to my chest. They were not just rewriting a will. They were rewriting reality. They had convinced themselves that stealing my inheritance was an act of moral righteousness. They believed they were the victims of a tyrannical grandmother, and I was just collateral damage that needed to be managed. I went back to my room and opened my laptop. I logged into the trust portal again. I read every single word of the deed. I read the section on unilateral authority. I read the section on liquidation rights. I realized then that my grandmother had not just left me a house. She had left me a trap, and she had handed me the trigger. She knew this night would come. She knew Darren was weak and Lydia was greedy. When I woke up the next morning, the morning of my 18th birthday, and went downstairs to find the house empty, I was not confused. When I walked into my father's office and saw the door ajar, I did not hesitate. And when I saw the photocopy of the new will on the desk, with my name crossed out in that violent red ink, I did not feel shock. I did not feel the sting of surprise. I felt validation. The red line through my name was not a discovery. It was the final piece of evidence in the case I had been building against them for a week. It was the confirmation that every suspicion, every overheard whisper, every gut feeling had been absolutely correct. They had left the document there because they were arrogant. They thought I was a child who would not understand what I was looking at, or perhaps they thought I was still the obedient girl who would see it and cry, waiting for them to come home so I could beg for mercy. They had prepared for a crying child. They had not prepared for a prosecutor. I looked at the paper one last time, memorizing the shape of my father's betrayal, and then I turned away. The investigation was over. The sentencing phase was about to begin. The moment I ended the call with Walter Briggs, the trembling in my hands stopped. It was as if the biological panic response had been overridden by a cold, hard operating system. I was no longer an 18-year-old girl waking up to a birthday betrayal. I was a CEO executing a hostile takeover of my own life. I sat down at my desk and composed an email to Walter. I needed ammunition, and I needed it in PDF format. Subject: Immediate action required. Harper Trust assets. Walter, per our conversation, please send me the full, certified deed to the property on Hawthorne Lane, along with a formal letter of authority stating that I, Callie Mercer, have the sole, unilateral right to sell, lease, or encumber the property as of today's date. I need this within 15 minutes. Do not make me wait. I hit send. There was no please or thank you. There was no room for politeness in a demolition zone. Next, I turned to the contact I had dug out of my journal, Elias Romano, the investor. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times, long enough for my heart to try and climb into my throat, before a gruff voice answered. Romano? Mr. Romano, I said, pitching my voice lower, trying to sound like the woman I was forcing myself to become. This is Callie Mercer. We texted 10 minutes ago regarding the property on Hawthorne Lane. I remember, he said. I could hear the background noise of a construction site. Drills, shouting, the beep of heavy machinery. You are the kid, right? The daughter? I am the owner, I corrected him sharply, and I have a proposition that expires at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I am listening, he said, the background noise fading as if he had stepped into a quiet car. The market value of this house is roughly $850,000, I said. I had done my research on Zillow weeks ago, just out of curiosity. It has a new roof, a chef's kitchen with Italian marble, and a heated saltwater pool, all paid for, all permitted. And? I will sell it to you today for $650,000, I said. There was a silence on the line. It was the silence of a predator smelling blood. $200,000 in instant equity was enough to make any investor salivate. What is the catch? Elias asked suspiciously. Is the foundation cracking? Mold in the attic? The house is pristine, I said. The catch is the timeline. I need a cash offer. No financing contingencies. No inspections. I need a non-refundable deposit of $50,000 wired to the trust account within the next 60 minutes, and the remaining balance wired by closing time today. We sign digitally. You get the keys at 6. Why the fire sale? He asked. Family matters, I said. Do you want the house, Mr. Romano? Or should I call the next investor on my list? Send me the wiring instructions, he said. I hung up. I did not celebrate. I did not smile. I simply opened my banking app and copied the routing number for the Harper Trust. While I waited for the money to move, I turned my attention to the printer. I had downloaded the last 4 years of transaction history from the trust's maintenance account, the account my father and Lydia had treated like a personal piggy bank. The printer hummed and whirred, spitting out sheet after sheet of evidence. I took a red marker, the same color they had used to cross out my name, and I began to circle the theft. $3,000 to a luxury car dealership for a down payment on the SUV. Circle. $4,500 to the Cheerleading Association for Savannah's travel camp in Florida. Circle. $45,000 to the pool contractor. Circle. $1,200 to a high-end steakhouse on a Tuesday night. Circle. I punched holes in the pages and slammed them into a thick black binder. I wrote a label for the spine in block letters. Misappropriation of fiduciary funds. This was my shield. If they tried to sue me, if they tried to claim I was stealing their home, I would slap this binder on a judge's desk and show the world that they had been stealing from me for a decade. They had not just spent money, they had spent my college tuition, my safety net, my future. My phone pinged, a notification from the bank. Incoming wire transfer, $50,000. Status, cleared. Elias was serious. The house was technically already sold. The deposit was non-refundable. If I backed out now, I kept the money. If he backed out, I kept the money. But neither of us was going to back out. I called the locksmith next. I chose a company 2 towns over, one that did not know my father or his contracting business. I need a full rekey of a residential property, I told the dispatcher, and I need high-security smart locks installed on the front and back doors, the kind I can control from an app on my phone. We can get someone out there Tuesday, the dispatcher said. I will pay double the labor rate for emergency service today, I said. I need someone here by noon. We will see you at noon, the dispatcher replied instantly. I emailed them the letter of authority that Walter had just sent me, proving I had the right to change the locks on my own house. Then, the movers. This was the trickiest part. I could not take everything. If I took a television that Lydia had bought, they could call the police for theft. I had to be surgical. I hired a man with a van service rather than a big moving company. 2 guys, 1 truck, hourly rate. I only have personal items. I told them when they arrived 30 minutes later. Clothes, books, a desk, a mattress, nothing attached to the walls, nothing from the common areas. I led them up to my room. It was strange to watch 2 strangers dismantle my sanctuary. They wrapped my mattress in plastic. They boxed up my books. They took the sweater Grandma Margaret had knitted. Margaret. I went into the bathroom and packed my toothbrush, my face wash, my towels. I left the soap in the dish. I left the shower curtain. Then, I did something specific. I went to the kitchen, to the junk drawer, where my father kept the spare keys to the shed and the garage. I took them. Then I went to the laundry room and found the physical deed to the house that my father kept in a fireproof box, thinking it was his. I didn't take it. That would be theft of a physical object. But I took a photo of it, and then I placed my own certified copy of the trust deed right on top of it. A silent message for when he opened the box next. While the movers were loading the van, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and made one final phone call. I needed a place to sleep. I had been accepted to Lakeview State University for the fall, but I had planned to commute from home to save money. That plan was dead. I looked up apartments near the campus. I found a studio in a complex called the Scholars Lofts. It was small, barely 400 square feet, but it was available immediately. I want to rent Unit 4B, I told the leasing agent. We usually require a credit check and a co-signer for anyone under 21, the agent said, her voice bored. I will pay 6 months of rent in advance, plus the security deposit, right now via certified check, I said. I can be there in 2 hours to sign. Money talks. It speaks a language that cuts through red tape and age restrictions. The agent's boredom vanished. I will have the keys ready for you, she said. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the house was echoing. My room was empty, just 4 walls and carpet indentations where my furniture had been. The movers were on their way to the storage unit I had rented near the university. I stood in the kitchen. The granite countertops I had paid for gleamed under the recessed lighting. The refrigerator hummed. I checked my email. Elias's lawyers had sent the final purchase agreement. It was a DocuSign file. I checked my bank account. I had called the fraud department earlier to warn them of the incoming transaction. They had flagged the account for monitoring but authorized the reception of funds. The remaining $600,000 was currently floating in the digital ether, moving from Elias's investment account to the Harper Trust. I walked to the front door as a white van pulled into the driveway. The locksmith. He hopped out, carrying a toolbox. "Callie Mercer?" he asked. "That is me," I said. "I have the smart locks," he said, holding up 2 boxes. "Keypad entry, remote access, camera integration, top of the line." "Perfect," I said. "Start with the front door, and I need you to disable all previous physical keys. If anyone tries to use an old key, I want it to be useless." "Standard procedure," he said, firing up his drill. The sound of the drill biting into the wood of the front door was aggressive and loud. It sounded like permanence. I looked at my watch. It was 1:15. My father and Lydia were likely finishing up a celebratory lunch right now. Maybe they were toasting with champagne. Maybe Lydia was making a joke about how they would turn my bedroom into a guest room or a walk-in closet for Savannah once I was encouraged to move out after graduation. They had no idea that the locks were being changed. They had no idea that their furniture was sitting inside a house that no longer belonged to them. They had no idea that the daughter they thought was a helpless dependent was currently the wealthiest person in the family. Standing in the foyer, with a finger hovering over the sign button on a digital contract, I took a deep breath. The air in the house felt different now. It didn't smell like gardenias and fear anymore. It smelled of sawdust and opportunity. I opened the DocuSign app on my phone. The contract loaded. Seller: the Margaret Harper Revocable Trust. Callie Mercer, trustee. Buyer: Romano Holdings, LLC. Purchase price: $650,000. I tapped the screen. My digital signature appeared in a neat, scripted font. Callie Mercer. I hit finish. A green checkmark appeared. Completed. I looked up at the locksmith. How long until the back door is done? 20 minutes, he said. Good, I said, because I have a feeling we might have company soon. The screen of my laptop was the brightest thing in the kitchen, a rectangular portal into a world where feelings did not matter, only signatures did. I sat at the granite island, the surface cool against my forearms, watching the cursor blink on the document Elias Romano had sent over. It was a standard purchase and sale agreement, but to me, it looked like a declaration of war. My phone was propped up against a napkin holder. The speakerphone on low. Walter Briggs was on the line, his voice tinny but steady, guiding me through the minefield of legalese from his office 10 blocks away. Scroll down to section 4, paragraph B, Walter instructed. Read it to me. I scrolled. The text was dense, but the meaning was sharp. Buyer acknowledges that the property is being sold as is, with no warranties expressed or implied. I read aloud. Buyer waives all rights to inspection and agrees to close the transaction within the same business day. Good, Walter said. And the financing contingency? Waived, I said, reading the bold text. Buyer certifies that funds are liquid and available for immediate wire transfer. This offer is not contingent on the sale of another property or the securing of a mortgage. That is the golden ticket, Callie, Walter said. That clause means there is no backing out. Once you sign, Elias is legally bound to pay, and you are legally bound to transfer the deed. There is no cooling-off period for a cash transaction of this nature in Ohio commercial real estate law, which is how we are structuring this due to the trust entity. I looked at the bottom of the screen. There were 2 signature lines waiting for me. They pulsed with a faint yellow highlight, demanding attention. The first line was for Callie Mercer, seller. The second line was for Callie Mercer, trustee of the Margaret Harper Revocable Trust. It was a strange duality. To my father and Lydia, I was just Callie, the girl who forgot to take out the trash, the girl who was an expense, a burden, a secondary character in their lives. But on this digital document, I was the entire cast. I was the owner and the manager. I was the beginning and the end. They had no idea that while they were out sipping celebratory mimosas, the 2 roles they thought were separate, the daughter and the decision-maker, had merged into one person who was currently evicting them. Are you ready? Walter asked. I did not hesitate. I have been ready since 6 this morning. I tapped the trackpad. My digital signature, a stylized cursive representation of my name, stamped itself onto the first line. Then I moved the cursor down and tapped again. Callie Mercer, trustee. The document flashed green, completed. A copy was automatically routed to Elias, to Walter, and to the county clerk's digital intake system. It is done, I said, my voice flat. Not quite, Walter corrected. Watch your banking app. I switched tabs to the trust's bank portal. I stared at the balance. For a long minute, nothing happened. The number sat there, static and unimpressive. Then, the screen flickered. A notification banner dropped down. Incoming wire transfer. $50,000. Source: Romano Holdings, LLC. Then another. Incoming wire transfer. $600,000. Source: Romano Holdings, LLC. The numbers spun and updated. The balance in the trust account swelled instantly, turning from a modest rainy day fund into a fortune. It was real money. It was not a promise or a check that could bounce. It was cold. Hard cash sitting in an account that only I could access. The funds have cleared, I told Walter. Then the property is sold, Walter said. Under Ohio law, with the contract signed and consideration paid, equitable title has passed. You are just holding the keys for the new owner now, or rather, you are preparing to hand them over. I am doing more than that, I said, looking toward the front door where the drilling had just stopped. The locksmith, a burly man named Dave, walked into the kitchen wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at me, then at the empty counters. Front door is done, Dave said. Smart lock is installed. Do you want to pair it? I stood up and walked over to him. The new lock was sleek, matte black, and looked aggressively modern against the traditional white wood of the door. It had a keypad and a small camera lens. Yes, I said. I opened the manufacturer's app on my phone. I scanned the QR code on the instruction manual Dave held out. The app synced. Device found. Front entry. Administrator. Callie Mercer. Now, Dave said, pointing to the settings. You can set user codes, but right now, you are the only one with access. I looked at the list of previous keys. There were none, obviously, since this was a new hardware installation, but physically, my father's key on his ring, Lydia's key with the rhinestone keychain, and Savannah's key with the pink lanyard. They were all now just useless pieces of jagged metal. They would slide into the lock, but they would not turn. They were artifacts of a home that no longer existed. Do the back door and the garage side door. I told Dave. Same setup, no physical override keys, app access only. You got it, he said, heading toward the back of the house. As the drill whirred to life again, the moving crew, 2 guys in matching blue shirts, came down the stairs carrying the last of my things. It wasn't much. I had been ruthless in my selection. They carried 3 medium boxes and 2 suitcases. That was it. That was the sum total of my 18 years in this house. I had left the bed. I had left the dresser. I had left the curtains. Those things were bought with Darren's money or chosen by Lydia. They were props in their stage play. And I was leaving the set. Is this everything, miss? One of the movers asked. Looking around the expansive, well-furnished living room, he seemed confused that I was leaving behind the 60-inch television and the leather sectional. That is everything, I confirmed. Take it to the storage unit on 4th Street. I will meet you there later to pay the balance. You are the boss, he shrugged. They loaded the van. I watched them go from the window. As the taillights of the moving van disappeared around the bend, my phone pinged with an email from Walter. Subject: Confirmation of recording. Callie, attached is the receipt from the county recorder's office. The memorandum of contract has been filed. The title transfer is officially in the system. The property records now list the trust as the seller and Romano Holdings as the buyer effective today. Any attempt by your father to mortgage, sell, or lien the property will be immediately flagged and rejected. This was the final piece of armor. I went to the printer one last time. I printed the email. I printed the full, signed contract with Elias. I printed the bank receipt showing the wire transfer. I printed the screenshot of the app showing I was the sole administrator of the locks. I took a stiff blue cardboard folder. I punched holes in the documents and fastened them inside. I organized them chronologically. The authority, the sale, the money, the transfer. It was a story told in paper. It was irrefutable. I placed the folder into my backpack, right next to my laptop. It felt heavy, but it was a good weight. It was the weight of leverage. The locksmith finished 20 minutes later. We stood together in the foyer. All done, Dave said. Front, back, garage, sensors are active. If anyone tries to force a window, the alarm goes to your phone. If anyone tries the keypad and gets it wrong 3 times, it locks down for 5 minutes and snaps a photo of them. Perfect, I said. I paid him via Venmo, tipping him $50 for the speed. Nice house, Dave said, looking around one last time. Moving in? Moving on, I said. He nodded, not asking for clarification, and left. I heard the front door click shut behind him. The electronic bolt engaged with a mechanical whir thunk that sounded final. I was alone. I walked through the house. It was just after 3 in the afternoon. The light was shifting, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. The house was silent, but it was not the same silence as this morning. 6 hours ago, the silence had been heavy with abandonment, the quiet of a girl forgotten on her birthday. Now, the silence was sharp. It was clean. It was the silence of a sterile operating room after the surgery is finished. I walked into the kitchen. I wiped down the counter where my laptop had been. I wanted no fingerprints, no sign of the work I had done. I went into the living room. I looked at the family portrait hanging over the fireplace. It was taken 3 years ago. Darren looked proud. Lydia looked glamorous. Savannah looked bored. And I was standing slightly to the side, my smile tight, looking like a guest who had accidentally wandered into the frame. I did not take the picture down. I did not smash it. I left it exactly where it was. It belonged to the previous owners. I checked my watch. 3:30. Elias Romano had texted me that he would be sending a property manager over at 5 to do a walkthrough, but he was content to let me handle the transition with the occupants until then. He assumed I had told them. He assumed this was a mutual decision. He was wrong, but that was not his problem. I sat down on the bottom step of the main staircase, my backpack next to me. I had the app open on my phone, watching the status of the locks. Front door, locked. Back door, locked. Garage door, locked. I was not waiting for a birthday party. I was waiting for the collision. In my mind, I replayed the timeline. They would be coming back soon. They would be happy. They would probably be carrying takeout food. Or maybe they had stopped shopping. They would pull into the driveway, expecting the garage door opener to work. It wouldn't. They would try the front door key. It wouldn't turn. They would think it was a mistake. They would think it was a jam. And then they would see me. I was not the victim anymore. I was the gatekeeper. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the house one last time. It smelled of lemon polish and expensive candles. Soon, it would smell of shock. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the banister. I was tired. A bone-deep exhaustion that came from adrenaline dumping out of my system, but I was also vibrating with a strange, dark energy. I had done it. I had sold the roof over their heads while they were out plotting to steal it from me. I had turned their sanctuary into a liquid asset in 12 hours. Now, all I had to do was open the door one last time. The crunch of gravel under heavy tires was a sound I had memorized over 18 years. It usually signaled that I had 5 minutes to check the dishwasher, straighten the pillows, and make myself invisible before my father and stepmother walked through the door. But today, standing behind the reinforced steel of the front door with my hand hovering over the smart lock panel on my phone, the sound did not trigger fear. It triggered a countdown. I watched through the digital feed of the new doorbell camera on my phone screen. The black SUV, the one my father was so proud of, rolled into the driveway. It stopped right next to the moving van's tire tracks, which were still fresh in the dirt. They got out laughing. My father was holding a shopping bag from a high-end electronics store, probably a graduation gift for Savannah, or perhaps a birthday gift for himself. Lydia was checking her reflection in the side mirror. Savannah was in the back seat, taking a selfie with the house in the background. They looked like the perfect suburban family returning to their castle. They had no idea the drawbridge had been pulled up. Lydia reached the porch first. She was digging in her purse for her keys, humming a tune. When she stopped, her eyes fixed on the bright red notice I had taped to the glass of the storm door just 10 minutes ago. The camera picked up her voice clearly. "What in the world?" She squinted, leaning in to read the bold black text. Property under contract. Do not disturb occupants. Direct all inquiries to the law office of Walter Briggs. She froze. The keys jingled in her hand, then went silent. "Darren!" she called out, her voice pitching up into a shriek. "Darren, come here! Someone put a prank sticker on our door." My father walked up the steps, his face flushed from the heat and the good mood. "What is it?" "Probably just some solicitor junk." He ripped the paper off the glass and crumbled it in his fist without reading it. He jammed his key into the lock that Dave the locksmith had replaced 3 hours ago. The key went in, but it did not turn. My father frowned. He jiggled it, he pulled it out, looked at it, and shoved it back in with more force. "What is wrong with this thing?" he muttered. He tried to turn it again. Twisting hard enough to bend the metal, the smart lock remained impassive. The LED ring around the keypad flashed red, denying him entry. "Let me try," Lydia said, shoving past him. She tried her key. Red flash. "It is broken," Darren growled. He started banging on the wood with the flat of his hand. Callie, open the damn door. The lock is jammed." I stood on the other side, not 3 feet away, breathing shallowly. I did not say a word. "Callie!" he screamed, his fist pounding harder now. "I know you are in there. Open this door right now, or you are grounded until you are 20. Savannah had stepped out of the car. She held her phone up, recording the scene. "Oh my God," she said, her voice oscillating between panic and the thrill of content creation. "Are we locked out? Is Callie pulling a prank?" "Open it!" Darren shouted, kicking the bottom of the door. I looked at my phone. I opened the security app. There was a button labeled Duress, Silent Panic. It was designed for home invasions, for moments when you could not speak but needed help. I pressed it. The app confirmed. Law enforcement dispatched. Silent alarm active. I waited. The pounding continued. Darren was shouting about replacing the door, about how useless I was for not answering. Lydia was calling the police non-emergency line to report vandalism to her lock. Inside the kitchen, 2 men stood silently. Walter Briggs sat at the island, his briefcase open, looking like a judge waiting for court to convene. Elias Romano, the new owner, leaned against the refrigerator, checking his watch with the indifference of a man who had seen everything in the real estate game. They were my witnesses. They were my jury. It took less than 6 minutes for the first siren to cut through the suburban air. When the blue and red lights washed over the front lawn, Darren stopped banging. He stepped back, looking confused but relieved. He thought they were there for him. He thought they were there to help the homeowner get back into his house. I saw 2 officers approach the porch. I saw Darren point at the door, gesturing wildly. I unlocked the deadbolt from my app. Click. I opened the door. The sudden movement silenced them all. My father stood there, his face red and sweaty. Lydia was behind him, clutching her pearls. Savannah was still filming. But they were not looking at me. They were looking past me. They were looking at the tall, broad-shouldered man in a construction jacket standing in their kitchen, and the elderly lawyer sitting at their dining table. "Who the hell are you?" Darren roared, stepping over the threshold, trying to push past me. "Officer, arrest these people. They are in my house." "Sir, step back," the lead officer said, his hand resting near his belt. He was a large man with a calm, tired face. "Everyone calm down." "Calm down?" Lydia screeched. "We come home and our key doesn't work. There are strangers in our kitchen, and my stepdaughter won't answer the door. I want them out." "Officer." Walter Briggs stood up. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of 50 years of courtroom experience. He walked into the foyer, holding a blue folder. "My name is Walter Briggs. I am the attorney for the Margaret Harper Trust. This is Elias Romano, the owner of this property." "Owner?" Darren laughed, a desperate, barking sound. "I am the owner. I have paid the bills here for 8 years. What kind of scam is this?" "It is not a scam, Mr. Lane," Walter said. "It is a closing. The The property was sold this afternoon. Sold? Lydia's eyes bulged. She looked at me, then at Darren. You sold the house? Without telling me? I didn't sell anything, Darren yelled. He turned to me, his eyes wild. Callie, tell them. Tell them this is insane. I sold it, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the sudden silence of the foyer, it sounded like a gunshot. You? Darren looked at me as if I had spoken in tongues. You can't sell my house. You are 18. You are a child. I am the trustee, I said, and the sole beneficiary. Officer, this is a domestic dispute, Darren said, trying to regain his composure, trying to use his reasonable businessman voice. My daughter is having a breakdown. She is confused. If you could just remove these gentlemen so we can handle this as a family. Officer, I said. Stepping forward, I reached into my backpack and pulled out the binder I had prepared. This is the deed to the house, held by the trust since I was 10 years old. This is the clause granting me unilateral power to liquidate assets upon my 18th birthday, which is today. I handed the officer the documents. He took them, flipping through the pages under the harsh light of the foyer chandelier. And this, I said, pulling out the second document, the one that made the air in the room drop 10 degrees, is the bill of sale and the title transfer, recorded with the county clerk at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Mr. Romano owns this building. You are currently trespassing. The officer looked at the papers. He looked at the dates. He looked at the signatures. This looks legal to me, the officer said, looking up at Darren. The title is in the trust's name. The transfer is certified. That is impossible. Darren lunged for the papers. The officer stepped back, putting a hand on Darren's chest. Do not touch me, sir, the officer warned. Show them the other paper, Callie, Walter said gently from behind me. I pulled out the photocopy, the one I had found on Darren's desk that morning, the draft of the new will. I held it up. The red ink where my name had been crossed out seemed to glow. You went to a lawyer this morning to make sure I would get nothing. I said to my father. I looked him dead in the eyes. You wanted to cut me out. You thought you had time. You thought you could wait until the paperwork was dry. Darren's face went pale. He recognized the document. He realized, in that second, that his open office door had been his undoing. Callie, that was just a draft, he stammered. We were just talking. We would never. You did, I said. And while you were doing that, I was doing this. I pointed to Elias. Mr. Romano bought the house. Cash. It is done. Lydia made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked around the living room, realizing for the first time that the walls were bare. The pictures of Savannah were gone. I had packed them in a box for them. My presence was erased. Where are our things? She whispered. Your furniture is here. Elias spoke up for the first time. His voice was gravelly and final. I bought the structure. I didn't buy your sofas. But since I plan to gut the place on Monday, you have a problem. We live here, Savannah cried out, lowering her phone. The reality was finally piercing the social media bubble. You can't just kick us out. Actually, the officer said, handing the papers back to me. If the title has transferred and there is no lease agreement, then you are guests. And if the owner wants you to leave, you have to leave. This is my home, Darren shouted, tears of rage and humiliation starting to form in his eyes. Not anymore, Mr. Lane, Walter said. Margaret Harper bought this home. She let you stay here. She hoped you would treat her granddaughter with respect. You chose differently. Darren looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw true fear in his eyes. He realized the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. The girl he ignored, the girl he used as a bank account, was standing before him holding the keys to his existence. Callie, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, it is your birthday. We can fix this. Just undo it. Give him the money back. We will make it right. I cannot undo it, I said. The money is already in the trust. The deed is recorded. You have 30 minutes, Elias said. checking his watch. I want to lock up by 7. Grab your essentials. You can hire a moving crew tomorrow to get the furniture. But tonight, the house gets secured. 30 minutes? Lydia screamed. To pack a whole life? You had 18 years to pack, I said cold-heartedly. You just didn't know the clock was running. The officer looked at Darren. Sir, I suggest you start gathering your things. I will stay here to ensure the peace is kept. Darren slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked like a man who had gambled everything on a bluff and had been called by a royal flush. He turned to Lydia. Go get the suitcases from the basement, he whispered. Darren, she protested. Go, he snapped, the anger flaring one last time before dying into defeat. I stood by the door as they scrambled. I watched them run up the stairs I had vacuumed 1,000 times. I watched Savannah crying as she shoved clothes into a duffel bag. I watched Lydia sweeping jewelry into her purse. I felt nothing, no pity, no regret. I looked at Walter. He gave me a small, sad nod. It was a courtroom, indeed, and the gavel had just come down. The officer checked his wristwatch, a thick black tactical piece that looked like it could survive a bomb blast. 15 minutes, he announced, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings of the foyer. That is the timeline. Grab your medication, grab your essential clothing, and vacate the premises. If you are not out the door by then, we move to criminal trespassing charges. The countdown triggered something feral in Lydia. She did not scramble for boxes. She scrambled for control. She spun around, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood, and pointed a manicured finger directly at my face. You are robbing us, she screamed. Her voice was not the polished, socialite tone she used at charity luncheons. It was shrill and jagged. Officer, look at her. She is standing there watching her family be thrown into the street. How can you protect a monster like that? I raised her. I fed her. You fed me leftovers, I said calmly. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The silence of the house amplified every syllable. I treated you like my own, Lydia wailed, turning to Elias Romano, who was watching the scene with the detached interest of a man watching a reality television show. She is a liar. She is ungrateful. We gave her a home, and this is how she repays us? By stealing our equity? It is not your equity, ma'am, Elias said, crossing his arms. It never was. Savannah, who had stopped filming when the reality of the eviction set in, was now crying. It was the ugly, hiccuping crying of a child who has never been told no in her life. She looked at me, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. You are ruining everything, she sobbed. My friends are going to see this. Everyone is going to know. Why are you doing this? Callie? I thought we were sisters. We are sisters, I said. That is why I am not suing you for the money you spent on your party. I didn't spend it, Savannah yelled. You gave it to me. You signed the papers. You always signed. You wanted me to have the pool. You wanted me to go to camp. You were the nice one. Her words hit me like a slap. She genuinely believed it. In her mind, my compliance had been enthusiasm. She had rewritten history so thoroughly that she actually believed I had enjoyed funding her life while I scraped by on minimum wage. I signed because I wanted to be loved, I said, my voice trembling slightly for the first time. I thought if I paid enough, you all would finally see me. But I was just an ATM to you, Savannah, and today, the machine is out of order. Darren had been standing by the stairs, looking pale and shell-shocked. He saw the cracks forming in Lydia's aggression and Savannah's hysteria, and he realized brute force wasn't working. He switched tactics. He softened his posture. He slumped his shoulders, trying to look like the weary, misunderstood patriarch. He took a step toward me, his hands open, palms up. Callie, sweetheart, he said. His voice was thick with manufactured emotion. Please, let's take a breath. Look at this. He gestured to the photocopy of the will that I was still holding. This paper, it means nothing, he pleaded. It was a draft, a mistake. I was angry about something else, And I let Lydia talk me into writing things I didn't mean. I was never going to sign it. I swear on your mother's grave. I was going to tear it up tomorrow. You were at the lawyer's office this morning, I reminded him. You were wearing your best suit. To tell him no, Darren lied. The falsehood was so clumsy it was almost insulting. I went there to tell him I couldn't do it. Callie, if you cancel this sale, I know you can. You can just tell Mr. Romano it was a mistake. I will write a new will right now. I will give you everything. Half the house. More than half. Just don't do this to your father. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had promised to protect me at a funeral 17 years ago. I don't need you to give me the house, Dad, I said. I already own it, and I don't need your will. I have my own money. I reached into my backpack again. I pulled out the black binder, the one with the label Misappropriation of Fiduciary Funds. I walked over to the entry table and slammed it down. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. I flipped it open to the first tab. Do you want to talk about mistakes? I asked. Let's talk about the $45,000 you took for the pool. Let's talk about the $3,000 a month for the management fee you paid yourself from my trust to run a house you were living in rent-free. I turned the pages, pointing to the circled numbers. Here is the tuition for Savannah's private cheer camp, $4,000. Here is the invoice for Lydia's cosmetic dental work, $6,000, classified as medical emergency in the ledger. Lydia went pale. She stopped screaming. She stared at the binder as if it were a bomb. I have 5 years of records here, I said, looking from my father to my stepmother. I have every receipt. I have every withdrawal slip. According to the state of Ohio, this is fiduciary abuse. It is theft. I could walk into a courtroom tomorrow and sue you for every single cent you took. I could garnish your wages. I could put a lien on your truck. Dad, I could leave you with absolutely nothing. The room was deadly silent. Even the police officer stepped closer, glancing at the binder with professional curiosity. But I am not going to do that, I said, closing the binder with a snap. I am taking the house, and I am calling it even. That is my mercy. That is the only gift you are getting from me today. Lydia looked at Darren. She saw the defeat in his eyes. She saw the walls closing in. The realization that they were not just losing a house, but that they had narrowly escaped a felony charge, broke her. But Lydia did not do shame. She did drama. She let out a choked sob and grabbed the lapels of her own coat. I can't do this, she wailed, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit or a weapon. If I lose this house, I lose everything. I can't start over. I might as well just end it. I might as well just throw myself in front of a car right now. My heart hammered in my chest, a part of me, the little girl who wanted a mother, wanted to rush forward and say, no, don't say that. We can fix it. But I stayed planted. I looked at the police officer. Officer, I said, my voice steady. She is making a threat of self-harm. The officer's demeanor shifted instantly from eviction enforcement to crisis management. He did not offer comfort. He offered protocol. He stepped between Lydia and the door. Ma'am, the officer said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming commanding and clinical. If you are stating that you are a danger to yourself, I am required by law to place you under an emergency psychiatric hold. We can have an ambulance here in 5 minutes to transport you to the county hospital for a 72-hour evaluation. Lydia froze. The threat of a hospital ward. No makeup, no phone, hospital gowns, real doctors, was not part of her script. She blinked, the tears stopping instantly. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered, backing away. I am just upset. I am just venting. Then I suggest you focus on packing, the officer said, his hand remaining on his radio. You have 8 minutes left. Darren watched his wife fold, and he looked back at me. He looked destroyed. He took a step toward me, ignoring the officer, ignoring the lawyer. He opened his arms. Callie, he whispered. Baby girl, please, do you remember when you were learning to walk? Right here in this hallway? You would fall down, and I would catch you. I always caught you. Doesn't that matter? Doesn't that count for anything? The memory washed over me. I did remember. I remembered the smell of his flannel shirts. I remembered trusting him. But then another memory superimposed itself over the first one. I saw Grandma Margaret lying in a hospital bed, her skin gray, clutching my hand. I heard her voice warning me. They will try to strip the meat from the bone. If I let him hug me now, if I let him wrap me in that familiar warmth, I would break. I would sign the papers back. I would give them the money. I would apologize for surviving. I took a sharp step back. I put my hand up, palm out, a stop sign. Do not touch me, I said. Darren flinched as if I had struck him. He stopped, his arms hovering in empty air. You caught me when I fell, I said, my voice shaking. But for the last 10 years, you have been the one pushing me down. Darren's arms dropped. He looked at the floor. He knew it was true. Where are we supposed to go? Savannah asked. Her voice was small, stripped of its usual entitlement. She was sitting on the bottom step, clutching a designer backpack. I have school on Monday. I have practice. What am I supposed to do? I looked at my sister. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was distant, like looking at a stranger through a telescope. You are smart, Savannah, I said. You will figure it out, or maybe you won't, but you need to learn how to survive without my name on the check. Time is up, the officer announced. The finality of the words seemed to suck the air out of the room. Lydia let out a sharp, angry breath. She grabbed 2 Louis Vuitton duffel bags that she had stuffed with who knows what. She didn't look at me. She marched out the door, her head held high, pretending this was a choice she had made. Savannah stood up. She looked at the living room, at the empty spot where the TV had been, at the ghost of her life. She looked at me one last time. There was no love in her eyes, only fear and confusion. She shouldered her bag and followed her mother. Darren was the last to go. He picked up a suitcase. He looked at Elias. He looked at Walter. And finally, he looked at me. You are a cold-hearted bitch, Callie, he whispered, just like your grandmother. It was meant to be an insult. It was meant to cut me deep. But I just nodded. Thank you, I said. He turned and walked out. I watched them go. I stood in the doorway and watched them load their bags into the black SUV. They looked ridiculous, dressed in expensive clothes, driving a luxury car, yet homeless. They left behind the sub-zero fridge, the heated pool, the marble countertops, the renovated garage. They left behind the shell of the life they had built on a foundation of sand. The officer walked out onto the porch. I will wait until they drive off, ma'am. Mr. Romano, do you need anything else? No, Elias said, stepping up beside me. We are good. Darren started the engine. The SUV reversed out of the driveway, kicking up gravel. They didn't honk. They didn't wave. They just turned the corner and vanished. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the fading sound of the engine. My heart was pounding in my ears, a rhythmic thumping that felt like applause. I turned back to the empty house. Walter was closing his briefcase. Elias was checking the lock on the back door. It was over. The 15 minutes were up, and for the first time in 18 years, the air in the house didn't taste like debt. It tasted like oxygen. The silence that followed the departure of the black SUV was absolute. It was not the peaceful quiet of a library or a church. It was the vacuum left behind after a bomb detonation. The air in the foyer still felt charged with the static of my stepmother's screams and my father's desperate pleas, but the physical space was now entirely mine. Or rather, it was mine for another 10 minutes. I turned away from the front door and walked into the dining room. This room had been the stage for so many performative family dinners. I looked at the long mahogany table where we used to sit for Thanksgiving. I remembered the years of sitting at the far end, near the kitchen door, watching Lydia carve the turkey while Savannah chattered about her friends and Darren nodded along, chewing silently. I remembered being the one who cleared the plates while they moved to the living room for coffee. Now, the table was bare. The centerpiece, a crystal vase Lydia loved, was gone. The placemats were gone. There was nothing left but the polished wood, my laptop, and a stack of legal documents that Walter Briggs had spread out with geometric precision. "Are you ready, Callie?" Walter asked. He was setting up a conference speakerphone in the center of the table. "I am ready," I said. I pulled out the heavy oak chair at the head of the table, my father's chair, and sat down. It felt too big for me, but I did not shrink. I sat up straight, placing my hands on the table. Elias Romano sat opposite me. He had his phone flat on the table, the banking app open, his finger hovering near the screen. He looked like a player at a high-stakes poker table who already knew he held the winning hand. "Connecting now," Walter said. The phone beeped, and a digital voice announced the participants. "State your names for the record," a dry, mechanical voice requested. It was the county notary, dialing in from her office downtown. Walter Briggs, attorney for the Margaret Harper Trust. Elias Romano, principal of Romano Holdings, LLC. Callie Mercer, trustee and sole beneficiary, I said. My voice was steady. It sounded older than 18. "We are here to finalize the conveyance of the property located at 42 Hawthorne Lane," the notary recited. "The deed has been prepared. The consideration has been verified. The seller has confirmed vacant possession." Vacant possession. That was the legal term for what I had just done. It sounded so clean. It did not capture the image of my sister crying on the stairs or my father threatening me. It just meant the house was empty. "Let us proceed to the final signatures," Walter said. He slid a heavy document toward me. It was printed on thick, bonded paper. "This is the grant deed. By signing this, you are formally transferring all title, interest, and rights from the trust to Mr. Romano. Once you sign this, you cannot take it back. The house is gone." I looked at the paper. I looked at the black line waiting for my ink. For a split second, a memory tried to surface. I saw myself at 5 years old, running down the hallway, laughing as my father chased me. I saw the Christmas tree in the corner of the living room. I saw the height chart pencil-marked on the doorframe of the pantry. But then I looked at the binder sitting next to my laptop, the binder full of theft, the binder that proved they had sold me out for a heated pool and a new kitchen. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy black fountain pen that Walter had handed me. This is not me selling my family's home. I thought, this is me executing the final order of General Margaret Harper. I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and permanent. Callie Mercer, trustee. I signed it. I dated it. I pushed the paper back to Walter. "Signature witnessed," Walter said into the speakerphone. "Scanning and uploading to the secure portal now." He passed the paper under a portable scanner he had brought with him. A moment later, the notary confirmed receipt on her end. "I see the signature," the notary said. "Mr. Romano, you may release the funds." Elias did not hesitate. He tapped his screen once. "Wire initiated," he said. We sat in silence for 30 seconds. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I stared at my own laptop screen, at the Harper Trust banking portal. Then, the screen blinked. Incoming wire transfer. $600,000. Status available. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The numbers on the screen were staggering. When added to the deposit, the total amount in the trust was now enough to buy 2 houses in this neighborhood. It was enough to pay for medical school, law school, or any future I wanted. It was enough to ensure that I never, ever had to ask anyone for permission to eat, sleep, or breathe again. My father had spent years trying to chip away at this fortune, stealing a few thousand here and a few thousand there, thinking he was clever. He had traded a kingdom for a few shiny toys, and now I had the kingdom in liquid cash. "Funds received," I said. "Transaction recorded," the notary announced. "Time of death for the previous deed is 4:45 in the afternoon. Romano Holdings is the owner of record. Congratulations, gentlemen, and Ms. Mercer." The line clicked dead. Walter reached over and unplugged the speakerphone. He gathered the papers into his briefcase. his movements slow and methodical. Elias stood up, he buttoned his jacket, he looked at me, and for the first time, his expression shifted from transactional indifference to something resembling respect. He extended his hand across the table. "Pleasure doing business with you, Callie," he said. I stood and shook his hand. His grip was firm, rough like sandpaper. "Thank you for the quick close," I said. "I have been buying houses for 20 years," Elias said. "I have dealt with banks, estates, divorces, and foreclosures. I have never seen an 18-year-old clear a house and close a deal in 12 hours flat." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "You have a shark's instinct," he said. "If you ever get tired of whatever you are planning to do in college, call me. I could use someone who knows how to cut the emotion out of the equation." "I will keep that in mind," I said. He nodded, pulled a business card from his pocket, and slid it across the mahogany table. Then he turned and walked toward the front door. "I will have my guys here at 7 a.m. Monday to start the demo." He threw over his shoulder. "Don't leave anything you want to keep." "I haven't," I said. The front door opened and closed. Elias was gone. Now it was just Walter and me, the lawyer who had known me since I was a toddler in pigtails. He snapped the latches of his briefcase shut. He did not look like a shark. He looked like a tired grandfather. He walked around the table and stood in front of me. He looked at my face, searching for cracks, searching for the tears that everyone expected me to shed. "You did good, kid," he said softly. "I did what had to be done," I replied. "Margaret was terrified of this day," Walter said. "She used to sit in my office and worry that you would be too soft. She worried that Darren would guilt-trip you into signing the house over to him. She worried that Lydia would bully you into submission." He reached out and patted my shoulder. "She underestimated you," he said. "If she were here right now, she would be laughing. She would be so incredibly proud." I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and sharp. That was the only approval I had ever craved. "Thank you, Walter," I whispered. "I will have the final trust accounting sent to your new address by Monday," he said, shifting back to his professional persona. "The money is yours. Invest it wisely. Don't be like your father." "I won't," I said. "I know," he said. He picked up his briefcase and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the latch, looking back at the empty dining room, the empty foyer, the empty life I was leaving behind. "Good luck, Callie," he said. Then he walked out, pulling the door shut behind him. The electronic lock engaged automatically. Whir click. I was alone. I stood in the silence. It was complete now. No sirens, no yelling, no legal jargon, just the hum of the refrigerator and the setting sun casting long, orange rectangles of light across the floor. I picked up my backpack. It felt lighter now, even though the laptop inside held a fortune. I decided to do one last lap. I needed to see it. I needed to verify that I wasn't leaving any part of myself behind. I walked into the living room. The fireplace was cold. I looked at the mantel where my mother's picture used to sit before Lydia moved it to a drawer. It was just wood, painted white, chipped slightly on the corner. I walked to the kitchen. I ran my hand over the marble island. It was cold and hard. It was just stone. It wasn't a symbol of my oppression anymore. It was just a surface where the new owner would probably eat his lunch on Monday before tearing it out with a sledgehammer. I walked to the sliding glass door and looked out at the backyard. The pool was glowing blue in the twilight, the heater humming, keeping the water warm for no one. Savannah's pool. It looked small from here. It looked like a puddle of expensive water. I walked to the hallway. I stopped at the pantry door. I looked at the faint pencil marks that marked my height from ages 3 to 7. Darren had drawn them. Callie. 3 wires. Callie. 5 years. I reached out and touched the graphite marks. I expected to feel a wave of grief. I expected to miss the father who had drawn those lines. But I felt nothing. The man who drew those lines had died a long time ago, buried under years of weakness and Lydia's perfume. The man who walked out of here today was a stranger who tried to rob me. This wasn't a home. It was a structure, It was 2,400 square feet of drywall, copper wiring, and timber. It was an asset class, and I had liquidated it. I turned my back on the height chart. I walked to the front door. I did not look back. I did not say goodbye to the house. You do not say goodbye to a cage when you are released. You simply walk out. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The evening air was cool and smelled of autumn leaves. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the Ohio sky in bruises of purple and gold. My cheap sedan was parked in the driveway, right where the moving van had been. It looked beautiful. It looked like a chariot. I pulled the door shut behind me. I listened for the lock. Whir click. I pulled out my phone. I opened the smart lock app. Device, front door, status, locked. I pressed the settings icon. I scrolled down to the bottom of the menu. Transfer ownership. I typed in the email address Elias had given me. Are you sure you want to transfer all administrative rights to Elias Romano at romanoholdings.com? This action cannot be undone. I tapped yes. The screen loaded for a second. Transfer complete. You no longer have access to this device. The app refreshed, and the dashboard was empty. No locks found, no home found. I smiled. It was the most beautiful blank screen I had ever seen. I walked down the steps, my shoes crunching on the gravel. I got into my car. I threw my backpack onto the passenger seat. I started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I shifted into drive and headed toward the main road, toward the university, toward my small studio apartment, toward a life that was finally, completely, and legally mine. The drive from Hawthorne Lane to the University District took only 20 minutes, but it felt like traversing two different planets. I left behind a world of manicured lawns, silent judgments, and debt disguised as luxury. I arrived in a world of cracked pavement, neon signs, and the chaotic, vibrant energy of people who were just starting to figure out who they were. I pulled my sedan into the narrow parking spot assigned to Unit 4B at the Scholars' Lofts. The building was a converted brick warehouse, industrial and unpolished. There was no grand foyer, no heated driveway, and definitely no marble countertops. I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet of the car for a moment. My phone was vibrating against my thigh, a relentless, angry buzz that had started the moment my family realized the garage door opener was never going to work again. I ignored it. I grabbed my backpack, the one containing the laptop that held a fortune and the binder that held the truth, and I walked up the 3 flights of stairs to my new front door. I unlocked it with a physical key. It felt satisfyingly heavy in my hand, a piece of brass that belonged only to me. The apartment was small. It was a studio, which meant the bedroom, living room, and kitchen were all one open space. The floors were laminate, not hardwood. The view from the single large window was of a street lamp and the brick wall of the library across the street. But as I dropped my bag on the floor and looked around, the space did not feel cramped. It felt vast. It felt breathless. I had paid the rent for 6 months in advance. I had paid the security deposit. I had filled the fridge with groceries I actually liked, not the kale and quinoa Lydia insisted we eat. I walked over to the simple wooden desk I had set up near the window earlier that week. On top of it, sitting alone in a pool of afternoon light, was a thick white envelope from the county court. I had filed the paperwork 6 weeks ago. I had done it quietly, paying the fees with cash I earned from my coffee shop shifts, sneaking out to the courthouse during my lunch breaks. It was a separate operation from the house sale, a parallel track of rebellion that I had kept hidden even deeper than the trust documents. My hands shook slightly as I picked up the letter opener. I sliced the top of the envelope. I pulled out the document. It was heavy, stamped with the official seal of the state of Ohio. Decree changing name. I scanned the legal text, skipping over the procedural jargon, until my eyes landed on the final, bolded order at the bottom of the page. It is so ordered that the petitioner, formerly known as Callie Mercer, shall henceforth be known for all legal and personal purposes as Callie Harper. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob, though my eyes were dry. Callie Harper. I traced the letters with my finger. Harper, my grandmother's name. The name of the woman who had saved me. The name of the woman who had seen my value when my father saw only a tax deduction. I was no longer a Mercer. I was no longer the daughter of Darren, the man who let his wife rewrite his loyalty. I had surgically removed myself from their lineage. Selling the house was business. This was personal. This was the true severance. My phone started buzzing again, dancing across the surface of the desk. I looked at the screen. Incoming call. Dad. Then a text from Savannah. We are at a Motel 6. Mom is freaking out. She says she's going to call the cops on you. How could you do this? Pick up the phone. Then a text from Lydia. You ungrateful little brat. I know you have money. Transfer us $10,000 right now for a hotel, or I swear to God I will come to your school and scream until you are expelled. I looked at the messages. Yesterday. These words would have spiked my cortisol. They would have made me sick with guilt. Yesterday. I was Callie Mercer, the girl who just wanted to be good enough. Today, I was Callie Harper, and Callie Harper did not negotiate with terrorists. I did not block them. That would give them the satisfaction of knowing they got a reaction. Instead, I swiped left on the notifications and hit delete. I silenced the phone and placed it face down on the desk. They could scream into the void as long as they wanted. I was not listening. I opened my laptop. I had one last piece of administration to handle. I composed a new email to Walter Briggs. Subject: Update of beneficiary information. Dear Walter, please find attached the court order regarding my legal name change. Effective immediately. Please update all records for the trust, the bank accounts, and the property sales documents to reflect my new legal name, Callie Harper. I would also like to request that you notify the university registrar to update my enrollment files. I want my degree to be issued to Callie Harper. There is no student named Callie Mercer attending Lakeview State this fall. Thank you. Callie Harper. I hit send. It was done. The final lock was turned. I stood up and walked to the kitchenette. It was tiny, with a 2-burner stove and a sink that was barely big enough to wash a plate. I filled a kettle with water and set it on the burner. The whistle of the kettle a few minutes later was a cheerful, domestic sound. I made a cup of tea, cheap chamomile from a box I bought at the discount store. I didn't need the imported loose-leaf tea Lydia used to buy. I stood by the window, wrapping my hands around the warm mug, and looked out at the street below. The street lights had flickered on, casting amber pools on the sidewalk. I saw students walking in groups, laughing, carrying books. They were heading to the library or to the dive bars down the street. They looked free. They looked unburdened. For the first time in my life, I felt like one of them. I was 18 years old. I had $650,000 in the bank. I had a roof over my head that no one could take away. And most importantly, I had a name that I was proud to speak. I picked up my phone again, but this time I did not look at the missed calls from my family. I opened my group chat with my 3 best friends, Jenna, Sam, and Mike. They were the ones who had picked me up when I couldn't afford a ride. They were the ones who shared their lunches with me when I was saving every penny. They knew about the trust, but they had never asked for a dime. Hey guys, I typed. It is done. The house is sold. I moved out. 3 bubbles appeared instantly. OMG, Jenna wrote. Are you okay? Did you actually do it? I did it, I replied. You are my hero. Sam added. Where are you? At the new place. I wrote, pizza tomorrow night? My treat. We are celebrating. Celebrating what? Mike asked. The money? No, I typed. We are celebrating Callie Harper. I sent a picture of the court document. The stream of heart emojis and supportive gifts that followed made me smile. A real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. This was my family. Not the people who shared my DNA, but the people who shared my values. I finished my tea and rinsed the mug in the sink. I turned off the lights in the main room, leaving only the soft glow of the street lamp filtering in through the window. I walked over to the twin-sized bed I had set up in the corner. The sheets were crisp and new. There was no duvet made of Egyptian cotton, just a simple quilt I had bought at Target. I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the banking app on my phone one last time. I looked at the balance. It was a number that represented security. It was a wall between me and the world. But I didn't stare at it. I didn't obsess over it. I simply acknowledged it as a tool, verified it was safe, and closed the app. I crawled under the covers. The mattress was a little firm, but it felt perfect. The room was quiet. I lay on my back, staring up at the ceiling. There were no water stains. There were no cracks. I thought about my father. I wondered if they had found a hotel room. I wondered if Lydia was still screaming. I wondered if Savannah was finally realizing that likes on Instagram could not pay rent. I felt a ghost of sadness, but it was faint, like a memory of a bad dream after you have woken up. I had given them 18 years of my life. I had given them my childhood. I had given them every chance to be decent. They had chosen the money, so I took the money away. I closed my eyes. In the darkness, I felt a presence. It wasn't scary. It felt like the smell of old books and loose-leaf tea. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered into the dark room. "I used the oar. I rowed away." I could almost hear her dry, raspy chuckle in the silence. I could almost feel the weight of her hand on my own. I rolled over and pulled the quilt up to my chin. Tomorrow was Monday. I had to go to the registrar's office. I had to buy textbooks. I had to start living. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't afraid of the morning. I wasn't afraid of waking up to a new rule, a new demand, or a new betrayal. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of my own apartment. From tomorrow on, no one would ever be able to use a red pen to cross my name out of my own life again. I was the author now, and I had a lot of writing to do. Thank you so much for listening to Callie's story of justice and reclaiming her identity. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on whether you think Callie went too far or if she did exactly what she needed to do. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more listeners.